He gave away his last horse just as the light was leaving the valley. Not in haste. Not in fear. He did it the way a man does something he already understands will cost him everything. The horse stood near the fence line, head low, hide dull with dust. It was old stock, tough and patient, the kind that learned to reign instead of fighting it. The kind that had carried him through 3 dry seasons and 1 winter that killed better men than hunger ever did. Without that horse, the ranch became a cage. The sisters waited a short distance off, careful not to step fully onto his land. 2 Apache women, young but worn thin by the road. Their dresses were torn at the hem, boots cracked, hair tied back with strips of cloth instead of ribbon. One leaned heavily on the other, favoring a leg that had been dragged, not walked. They had been moving since dawn. That much was clear. The rancher studied the horizon first. Old habit. Nothing stirred but heat and dust. No riders. No wagons. Still, he did not relax. Out here, danger learned patience. "You won't make the pass before dark," he said at last. They did not answer. Their eyes stayed on the horse. Not greedy. Measuring. He reached into his pocket, took out the small knife he used for feed twine, and cut the reins free from the post. The sound of leather giving way carried farther than it should have. The land remembered noises like that. For a moment, he held the reins loosely, as if waiting for permission from something older than himself. Then he stepped forward and offered them out. The younger sister hesitated. The older one shook her head once, warning, not refusal. She had learned the cost of accepting help from men who lived under paper law and crooked stars. "It's not charity," the rancher said. His voice was calm, but there was no softness in it. "It's a correction." That made her look at him. She saw then what the land had already told her. The empty corral. The dry trough. The single cabin patched too many times. This man did not have surplus. He had only choice. She took the reins. Her fingers brushed his hand, brief, deliberate. Not gratitude. Recognition. The younger sister mounted with effort. Pain flared across her face, then settled into something hard and controlled. The older sister swung up behind her, one arm steadying, the other holding the reins. Before they turned east, the older one spoke. "They will notice," she said. "I know," the rancher replied. The sister nodded once, then urged the horse forward. Hooves kicked dust, light at first, then fading as the sun slipped behind the ridge and the valley filled with shadow. The rancher stood until the sound was gone. Only then did he feel it, the weight settling in his chest, heavy and final. He was no longer a man who had stayed out of things. He turned back toward the cabin, already hearing, somewhere deep in the quiet, the first distant sound of consequences beginning to move. The night did not pass cleanly. The rancher slept in pieces, waking to sounds that turned out to be nothing: wind through dry grass, timber settling, an owl lifting off the roof. Each time, his hand found the rifle beside the bed, and each time he let it go again. If what was coming could be stopped by a gun, it would have already. By morning, a dust haze lay low over the valley. The kind that carried voices if you listened too hard. He rode into town on a borrowed mule just after sunrise. Men looked up when they heard the hooves, then looked away just as fast. No greetings. No questions. News moved quicker than horses out here. At the mercantile, the owner paused mid-scoop when he saw him. "You see anyone last night?" the man asked, not meeting his eyes. "2 sisters," the rancher said. "Heading east." The scoop stilled. Grain spilled over the scale. You shouldn't involve yourself, the owner muttered. In what? The man exhaled through his nose, sharp and quiet. In things that already have owners. That was how it was spoken. Not crimes. Not sins. Ownership. Outside, an old drover sat on a barrel, chewing nothing, watching everything. He had hauled freight through Apache land before the maps pretended it was empty. He tilted his head toward the hills. There's talk, the drover said. About riders who don't announce themselves. The rancher waited. They don't take scalps. Don't burn towns. They take accounts. The drover's eyes were flat. You cross certain lines, they don't come loud. They come complete. And if you help someone who crossed those lines, the rancher asked. The drover looked at him then. Really looked. Then you better have meant it. Noon passed with the sound of wagons rolling out faster than usual. A deputy left town without his badge. 2 men who ran cattle along the southern wash didn't open their store. By evening, the wind shifted. The rancher stood on his porch and watched clouds gather where they didn't belong. Not storm clouds. Riders. Far off, strung along the ridgeline like dark punctuation marks. He counted them without trying. The land held its breath. Somewhere between dusk and nightfall, the rancher understood something the town never would. What he had given was not the horse. It was permission. And whatever was coming next would not ask the law how to arrive. The first sound came before the light. Not a shout. Not a war cry. Just the low, steady rhythm of hooves pressing into earth that had learned to remember weight. The rancher rose from his bed already awake, rifle left where it leaned. He stepped outside as the sky paled, that narrow hour when the world is honest about what stands upon it. They were there. Riders ringed the ranch at a measured distance, far enough to show restraint, close enough to make departure impossible. Men and women alike, mounted, still. Their horses were fresh, well-fed, disciplined. No banners. No paint. Only eyes that had counted the ground and found it wanting. The corral gate hung open. No one had touched the cabin. A man rode forward from the eastern line. Older than the rest, shoulders set from decades of miles. His hair was braided with care, streaked gray, his coat worn thin but clean. He did not raise his rifle. The rancher stepped off the porch and stood in the dirt, hands loose at his sides. You gave them the horse, the man said. It was not a question. Yes. They were taken from the road, the elder continued. Marked as thieves so others could sell them. The rancher nodded. He had suspected. Knowing it aloud felt heavier. You returned what was taken, the elder said. At cost. I did what was mine to do. The man studied him a moment longer, then looked past him, to the land, the empty corral, the dry field stretching nowhere. Then this place is finished with, he said. A single shot echoed from the far hills. Distant. Final. Not meant for the rancher. The riders did not move. They waited, listening. Another sound followed, hooves, fast, then stopping abruptly. The elder turned back to the rancher. There are men who believe this valley belongs to paper and ink. They believe what they write becomes true. He leaned slightly in the saddle. By nightfall, they will learn otherwise. Without another word, he wheeled his horse and rode back into the line. One by one, the riders peeled away, not in retreat, but in direction, south, west, north, flowing outward like a tide that had only just reached its height. The rancher stood alone again as the sun cleared the ridge. Smoke rose far off, thin and deliberate. He understood then, the ring around his ranch had never been a threat. It had been a line drawn, so no harm would come to the one man who had chosen to stand where others stepped aside. The reckoning did not arrive as gunfire in the streets. It came as subtraction. By the third day, 3 ranches sat empty. Not burned. Not looted. Simply abandoned, as if the men who owned them had stepped out of their boots and never returned. Their brands were gone from the gates, carved out clean and left on the ground like discarded signatures. The sheriff locked his office and rode west before dawn. He did not leave a note. He did not take the jail keys. No one chased him. Wagons that once moved at night stopped appearing altogether. The southern trail fell quiet. The border road, long used by men who preferred not to be seen, grew dust over its ruts. And the truth, long buried under ledgers and lies, began to surface. Women had been taken under false charges. Vagrancy. Theft. Names written down so they could be erased. They were held briefly, then sold farther south, moved hand to hand by men who called it transport and charged a fee for silence. The town had benefited. Stores stayed open. Debts were forgiven. Papers were stamped. No one had needed to believe it was right. Only that it was normal. The Apache did not strike the town. They struck the arrangement. A trader was found tied to his own scale, alive but ruined, his account books burned beside him. 2 cattle buyers returned from the desert on foot, their horses gone, their money scattered along the trail for others to find. No speeches were made. No demands issued. The message was carried by absence and fear and the sudden understanding that the land itself no longer tolerated certain footsteps. From his porch, the rancher watched it all unfold without moving. He understood now why the sisters had not thanked him. What he had interrupted was not a single crime, but a system that fed on quiet men and quieter roads. And systems, once seen, do not forgive interference. They collapse. By the time the heat broke, the valley had learned a new shape. No lawman rode patrol. No wagons cut the southern trail. The men who remained kept their dealings small and their voices lower than before. It was not fear that governed them now, but memory. The rancher rebuilt his corral plank by plank, using timber taken from an abandoned fence line. He worked slowly, not from caution, but from respect. Some places, once corrected, did not care to be rushed. One evening near sundown, a boy appeared at the edge of the property. Apache, no more than 12. He held the reins of a horse that stood calm and solid, its coat dark, its eyes steady. The boy said nothing. He only led the horse to the post and tied it. When the rancher stepped forward, the boy had already turned back toward the hills. The horse bore no brand. The rancher did not call after him. That night, riders appeared once more on the distant ridge, only 3 this time, watching the valley as the last light drained from it. They did not stay long. In the seasons that followed, travelers learned the road again. Women passed through without vanishing. Paper law returned, thinner and more careful, written by men who now understood its limits. The ranch remained small. It always would. But when the wind crossed the valley at dusk, it carried a quiet certainty with it, the knowledge that some lines, once drawn in the dust, are not meant to be crossed again. And that sometimes, all it takes to change the shape of a land is one man, one choice, and a horse given away before nightfall.